Once upon a time, there was a man named Fred. Moved to a small town. Call it, I don't know, Townville or whatever the case may be. And he noticed the town didn't have a cookie shop. So what he did is he opened up a cookie shop. He called it Fred's Cookies. Well, Fred's Cookies were the best cookies ever. They were melty. They were delicious. They were moist. I'm talking like crumble cookie level stuff. The cookies were so good, in fact, that the local grocery store stocked them. They had them at gas stations. They stocked them at gas stations. They were on menus. They were on dessert menus at a few restaurants in town. Everyone in town loved Fred's Cookies. Now, as a result of this unbelievably delicious cookie, Fred becomes wealthy. He does well. He's got money. He's making money. He's wealthy. He's got a family, wife, kids. Wife didn't have to work. Kids went to private school, the whole bit. A few years go by, and on a random afternoon, a longtime customer comes into the store. His name is Charles. He's like, "Hey, Fred, how are you doing?" Fred's like, "Hey, not doing too bad. The cookie business still going strong." He's like, "Yeah, well, look, Fred, your cookies are still good, okay, but not quite as good." Okay, so the shop owner, Fred, tells him, "Nah, that can't be true. I've been using the same recipe and the same ingredients since the beginning." Okay, maybe it's me, Charles says. Wasn't a contentious discussion at all. Just kind of brought a concern. The customer brought his usual dozen or so cookies. He leaves the cookie shop, says to the shop owner, "Thanks, see you next time." Right. A few more years go by, and the shop owner is starting to get more of these complaints about his cookies. People in the town are telling him they're too dry, they're not sweet enough, sometimes they're too sweet, the texture is off, etc., etc. But again, Fred, the shop owner, jovially dismissed their concerns, ensuring them that he's been using the same recipe for years. Well, a couple more years go by, and a new cookie shop opens up right across the street. Now, customers are a little apprehensive, but eventually that new cookie shop started getting customers. Still not as many customers as Fred's Cookies. Now, let me just sort of diverge here so that you guys can understand something economically. Everyone thinks that a shop opening up across the street from your business is a bad thing. Guys, this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing, okay? When you and again, the reason I can speak to this is because I've owned a couple of small businesses. When you are near a business that's the same as yours, you increase your potential customer base. Have you guys ever noticed that all car dealerships, when you go to a car dealership, there are other car dealerships around, right? This is why car dealerships are often right next to each other. Same with the food court at the mall. There are multiple restaurants in there. Same with furniture stores. Restaurants in town, mattress stores are often situated right next to each other to increase the customer base. Well, Fred understood this concept, and this is why he didn't freak out like most small business owners do when a similar business opens up across the street. So a couple more years go by, and the complaints continue to mount. As a result, the cookie shop across the street started to get more business than Fred's Cookies. So Fred finally says to himself, I'm going to find out what is so special about this cookie. So Fred walks outside and he sees his old friend Charles coming out of the other cookie shop with a box of cookies. Now Fred was shocked. So he goes up to Charles and he says, what's going on here? You've been buying my cookies for years. Why are you buying that? Why are you buying cookies from the new cookie shop? I thought we were friends, he said. Charles said, well, look, we are friends, but I got to be honest with you. The new cookie shop has better cookies now. Fred gets upset and he says, why? Why are his cookies suddenly better than mine? Charles said, well, they're moist, they're chocolatey, and they're delicious. Fred turns on his heel and he angrily stomps back into his cookie shop in disbelief. And the thing is Charles used to say this about his cookies, and now he's fraternizing with the enemy. How could he? Well, a few more years go by, and this time Fred is on the brink of bankruptcy. Fred's Cookies was struggling to stay above water. He was behind on his business loans. He had to lay off a few of his employees because he couldn't afford to pay them. I mean, times were tough. So in desperation, he mortgages his house to keep the business afloat for just a few more months. But a few more months later, things were much, much worse. He had to lay off his entire staff. So now he had to work at the cookie shop 7 days a week. He had to pull his kids out of private school. His wife left him. I mean, his entire life is falling completely apart. Well, the day after he laid off his staff, his now estranged Charles stops into the shop for a visit. Fred tells him all about the failing business. He tells Charles, my wife left me. I had to pull my kids out of private school. So Charles suggests, well, look, Fred, why don't you make your cookies like the cookie shop across the street? Fred says, because the townspeople love my cookies. Okay, they shouldn't like their cookies. They should like my cookies because I was here first. So Charles finally calms him down and says, look, something changed in your kitchen, Fred. Fred says, well, what are you talking about? I've been using the same recipe for years and years and years. I've never changed it. Charles looks around the shop. He says, I don't know. Maybe it's the equipment. Maybe it's the oven you're making the cookies in. Nonsense, Fred says. I bought the best oven money could buy. You remember when I bought it, don't you? He asked Charles. Charles said, yeah, the Cookie Maker 2000. You got it at the appliance store. It was touted as the best. It was touted as the best oven that you could buy to make cookies. So Fred says, right. So it can't be the oven. Charles sighs and says, Fred, it has to be the oven. The oven doesn't cook as the oven that you threw out. Fred says, well, that's not true. The Cookie Maker 2000 was all over TV. It was all over magazines. It was all on the internet. It was touted as the greatest oven in the world to make cookies. Charles says, I don't know, Fred. Your customers are starting to dry up when your customers started drying up when you bought that thing. That has got to be the problem. It has to be the oven. Fred gets upset and says, but all of the reviews were 5 stars and the cookie shop owners raved about how great it was. There is no way it's the oven. Charles says, okay, I'm not going to push it anymore. I was just trying to help. Fred says, yeah, I know, and I appreciate it. So the two get up and walk outside. When Charles asks Fred, well, where are you going? Isn't the shop still open for another few hours? Fred says, yeah, but I'm headed to the bank to get another loan. Well, for what? Charles asks. Well, to buy another Cookie Maker 2000, Fred answered. Charles says, what? Are you kidding me? Why? Fred says, well, because the one in my cookie shop has been giving me major problems for the last few years. Suit yourself, Charles says, and they go their separate ways. On his way to the bank, Fred happened to see through the window of the cookie shop who had taken all of his business. And in the kitchen, he saw the oven he threw out for the Cookie Maker 2000 in their kitchen. Fred says to himself, these people have no idea that my cookies are so much better than theirs. They don't know cookies. Those customers should be my cookies. Those customers should be my customers. And he continued to the bank to get a loan for another Cookie Maker 2000. Gentlemen, this is what dealing with black women has been like for the last 60 plus years. Feminism convinced women that it was good for them, just like Fred was convinced that the Cookie Maker 2000 was the best oven on the market. And over time, black men started to notice subtle changes in the behaviors of black women and we started to voice our concerns, just like the customers at Fred's Cookies. But black women ignored the concerns of black men and continued carrying on with the girl power movement, just like Fred refused to change the way he made his cookies. Over time, things got worse and worse for black women, and black men started voicing their concerns a little louder now. Still, the black woman wouldn't listen, just like Fred continued to ignore his customers' concerns despite the fact that things were still getting worse. Decades later, black men started dating outside of our race, as well as now telling black women why we're dating outside of our race, and still, the American black woman refused to change, just like Fred refused to believe that the Cookie Maker 2000 was the problem. And now here in 2025, there is literally no hope for black women. The top black men have completely checked out. Any black man with any status, clout, wealth, etc. chooses non-black women almost all the time. Black women are the lowest on the sexual totem pole. They have no viable options outside of street niggas. And still, the fact that they are in literal dire straits and on the verge of fulfilling the very warning the late, great Kevin Samuels issued time and time again, which was buy a dog and die alone. The black woman not only doubles down, but she's now telling us that we shouldn't be attracted to what we're attracted to. Just like Fred said his customers should like his inferior cookies as opposed to the superior cookies from across the street. Fred bought into the lie that the Cookie Maker 2000 was the best cookie maker on the market, just like the black woman bought into the ludicrous idea that feminism was going to de-oppress them. When black men discovered that the American black woman wasn't his only option, we started dating outside of our race. And surprise, surprise, the black woman who did her level best to shame us, to ridicule us, and to mock us complained about it, just like the customers who discovered a better option across the street. So I'm going to bring in